Hello, everybody, and welcome to Radio Entrepreneurs, the show that's constantly talking and showing you stories about entrepreneurship in this economy. My name is JDavis. I am the host of Radio Entrepreneurs. Today, we're going to be speaking with Jamie Copeland, the founder of Hudson's Design architectural firm. Welcome, Jamie.
Right. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Tell me about your practice at Hudson Design, because I know that it's something very, you're very unique at what you do.
Well, thank you. It's been a process, and I once had a client say he didn't like process, but process is such a life function that it's architects. It is our way of getting the best decisions made. So when you say unique practice, we started like most people. I was an intern. I was working in New York City, and I had come to understand I had some gifts. I didn't know necessarily how to use them, but I knew that early on in my childhood, I had been playing with blocks, and I had a passion for building things. And that led me to the School of Engineering. And then ultimately, I realized with some frustration that engineering was not as creative as I had hoped. And my roommate at the time was an upperclassman. And he would come in to the room and crash into bed about 2 a.m. And finally I realized he was not a drinker. And I asked him, Chuck, where do you go until 2 a.m.? And he said, well, come, I'll show you. And he took me over to a building on the east end of campus where the lights never went out. And I had assumed that that's where they generated steam for NC State campus, because the lights never went out. And he took me into this building, Liesner Hall, and it was full of studios. There were people there making furniture. There were landscape architecture students doing murals. There were graphics artists, architects building models of buildings, and it was fascinating. I realized at that point I needed to change my degree, and so I transferred into the School of Architecture, and that led to I've now been doing this 30 plus years, and I love what we do, and I've got a like-minded group of people with me who also have discovered a way of serving people with their gifts.
So, Jamie, some of the things I know about architecture, sometimes, there's a look and there's a feel, there's a style. Can you describe your look, your feel, your style? What makes you Jamie?
Well, that is an important question, and it is an important realization for me that it is not about me. I've discovered that to practice well and to serve well, it's not about me. We spend a lot of time understanding what our clients want, understanding what drives them to buy a piece of real estate or to move to a certain community. It has been an epiphany in a way. I worked for architects that were driven by getting published. Some were driven by making money. Those were the particularly misguided. But there were a lot of reasons why people sought out architecture, but many of them were not very fulfilling. What makes architecture fulfilling for me is serving other people. So it's never been about my look. We spend a lot of time trying to help clients, owners, families discover their style, and we do it beautifully. We do it with an understanding of design, understanding of the history of architecture, and the many ways in which you can accomplish good design. So it's not about me. It's not about our firm.
Well, obviously, but I have heard that you have you look at the structure uniquely in terms of how it blends into the environment. For me, that's just I don't understand it unless you could sort of explain that a little bit better to me.
Well, one common mistake that architects make is to focus on the thing, to creating something. It's really it's a collaboration of things. It's an amalgam of influences that really start with the land and the owner's goals. Those are the fundamentals. I had one professor gave us a very poignant lesson about how you master plan and how you focus on the most important components. He brought in a big glass vase, a bucket of gravel, 3 rocks, a pail of sand, and a pitcher of water. And he looked out to the audience and we had a class of first-year design students, and he said, who's going to bet me that I can fit everything in this vase? And of course, we look at all the components and we think, there's no way. There's no way all of that's going to fit in. And so he, one by one, he carefully placed the big stones inside the vase. He then took the gravel and poured the gravel in and shook and said, all right, you think the rest of this is going to be? Now, by that time, we were on to him. We realized our mistake, was assuming that all of that stuff had to go in at one time. He took the pail of sand and he poured that in and shook it. And then he held up the pitcher. And of course, by that time, the gig was up. We knew he was right. But the point of his message was, you have to get the large, most form-giving components into the project first. So if you're working for a family and they have a special needs child, that's one of the large stones you got to work with. If you're working for a company and they have a particular process that is critical to their making money, that's got to be the big stone that goes in first. I had an interesting experience with a client up in Albany. The father was claustrophobic. The son had an aversion for spaces large. He was terrified with large spaces. And you can imagine, I'm sitting there in at their dining table, and we're talking about the house, and he's saying, I want this foyer to be soaring, and I want, meanwhile, his son is is ducking his head, trying to get under the table. And finally, it came time to talk about the bedrooms. And I asked Brian, I said, Brian, where's your favorite hiding place? Because I knew most children have trouble with large spaces, especially those who are special needs children. And he knew exactly what I was talking about. And he hopped up and he disappeared into the living room. And we followed to find him. And he was nowhere. He's not behind the curtains. He's not on cushions. I mean, he had completely disappeared in that living room. And finally, I looked at this coffee table that had a display case in it that stopped at about 6 inches from the floor. Brian had gotten his entire torso underneath that's a display case. And it was his favorite place to hide. So it just goes to show you, we have within families, we have sometimes conflicting ideas that have to be worked out early in the process. And it is these large ideas that must go first. And so that has driven a lot of our process. Is how do we help clients? How do we help owners? How do we help family members identify what's truly important to them?
Interesting. We are speaking with Jamie Copeland, founder of Hudson Design. Jamie, if someone wants to view some of the firm's work, get to know, and maybe contact you, how would they find you?
We have a website. It's hudsondesign.pro. We have we have a website, and we also have a Facebook page. We try and be findable. We're in Garrison, but we also do quite a bit of work up and down the Hudson River into the Adirondacks. We've done projects in the Caribbean. In March, I'm going to Malawi to talk with the founder about a high school that she wants to build in Malawi. I would say that we're not bound by a region. It's more finding the right mix of things that we're really good at. I would say recreation, hospitality, and bespoke residential work is probably our forte.
Great. And I want to remind everybody that this is Radio Entrepreneurs.